Hey guys, today I am working on a panel from a new comic that I've recently been drafting. And this is really exciting for me because this is my first project after completing Rogue's Dagger, and it's also a completely new format that I haven't really done before, which is comics. And I've done webtoons and manga and very, very short black and white comics for school projects, but I've never actually strived to do a fully colored one. And after watching Superman and the new Spider-Man movie, I honestly started getting back into reading comics again, and it really inspired me to make my own. I've always loved Batman and reading his comics when I was in middle school and high school, and I also grew up loving the Marvel Universe because of the movies. Literally, one of my favorite movies of all time is Doctor Strange. And it's surprising that I'm doing comics now after reading them for so long, but I guess today is just the day. So the idea I'm using for this comic is actually something I've had for probably a couple of years now. Originally, it was my attempt at making a romance webtoon, which was the original story, but over time, when I did decide to make a comic, I was like, why don't I just revisit this story that I was already writing? So it kind of morphed into something with a little bit more action. Everything is still in progress, so I don't want to share too much, but today I will be yapping while I work on it. Originally, I wanted to make this into a 30-day challenge where I finish the whole thing within a month, from the storyboards to coloring to finalizing, but I realized even though I'm only like 10 days in, my schedule is already looking a little tight, but also try my best. Despite that though, I definitely want to provide as many updates as I can throughout the process, especially because this is something I'm passionate about, and I think holding me accountable for it would motivate me to finish it when I put it out there. I'd even love to make this into something physical if possible, so hopefully everything turns out well. But while the storyboarding and sketching process went fairly smoothly, the moment I started getting into line art, I started feeling myself getting overwhelmed again. I realized just how much work I had committed myself to, and honestly, I started backing off because I was putting way too much pressure on myself. And that eventually led to more burnout and fatigue towards my art, and I just didn't want to draw anymore, and I didn't want to work on the comic, and I just didn't even really want to look at it. And feeling like this while also wanting to move toward making art more of a career than just a hobby is actually kind of scary. Because how am I supposed to get better if I don't draw? And if I don't draw, how am I supposed to put any of my work out there? And I think we as artists put way too much pressure on ourselves to be perfect and to just pump out art 24/7. And obviously, it's great to want to put your best work out there, and you should care about the things that you make. But I don't think it's worth sacrificing your sanity just to make sure that you have like a picture perfect piece of art to put out there. So in order to actually fix this, I had to relinquish some of the control over this perfectionism. And if you watch the last video, I kind of talk about the same topic, but I had to tell myself that I'm allowed to be bad, especially when I'm doing something I'm unfamiliar with in this new format. Because every time I push myself just to finish a piece instead of obsessing over every single detail, I gain something that's honestly way more valuable than a perfectly rendered drawing. I gain the discipline to actually finish something, which is what I need if I'm gonna take on something of this scale. And that's something I really need to remind myself of. While I was working on the details of this comic, I was really scared to hone in on the lines because I kept comparing myself to artists I look up to like Dan Mora, Jorge Jimenez, Simone de Mayo, and Greg Capullo. And I had to remind myself I'm literally not them. These people have poured years and years into their craft, and they've drawn tens, if not hundreds, of comic issues. And obviously, I'm not going to be at that level yet, and that's totally okay. We need to allow ourselves to be bad so that we can actually become better. I guess technically my first comic would be Rogue's Dagger, which I wrote in 8th grade and decided, just because I loved reading Lore Olympus and I Love You so much, I was like, I want to make my own webtoon. So I used that old story and kind of made it different for Rogue's Dagger. I changed it, I made the plot a little bit better, and I started that in my junior year. And then my first ever full comic that I made was one for my senior year of high school for a school project, which was called Zombilly. And originally it was supposed to be colored, but I got kind of lazy and I didn't have that much time to finish it because I was taking so long on the line art. So I just colored like one color, like to make it like a little bit contrasted at least. I'll show you guys here. But then after that, I think it was actually the summer after I had graduated high school, I made a comic called Makaro, which was for a manga contest and that I didn't win. And I sent it to my old English teacher at the time, and the feedback he gave me was so nice, and he told me to keep going, and that honestly motivated me to make more manga. And then after I worked on these two, a writer who read Rogue's Dagger asked me to illustrate Happiness Equation, and then after that I worked on another one with him, which was called Hollywood Shonen Boy. And Happiness Equation was like a soccer manga, and mind you, like literally I've never played soccer in my life. I probably played it like once or twice in PE, but I didn't really like get it, I guess. But working on that like really helped me to understand different topics that I'm not necessarily familiar with, and it got me out of my comfort zone. And it was just nice to work with a writer who was passionate about their work and also believed in me as an artist. And then I think a year after that, we did Hollywood Shonen Boy together, which was a manga about a filmmaker, which I honestly really loved. But I think between these two comics, actually the writer that I was working with won a Shonen Jump award, and I was like, wow, that's like really cool. And honestly, he was actually like a shonen protagonist because he was like, we can do it, like was so like passionate in his work, and I was like honestly like, really proud of him like when he got that. And eventually all that work led me to him putting me on a project for a publisher that was doing another soccer book. I think it was like a tactics book, and so it was called The Forefront of Soccer Tactics. And so they wanted me to illustrate a little, I think it was about 12 pages of manga for that. And then so I did, and then it got published, and it was really cool to see, let alone like published and then overseas in Japan. And I thought that was so cool. And I started working with this writer more for like more side projects. So also I was able to illustrate something for Paris Saint-Germain's like Japan tour. And then I did some freelance coloring work for Legend HQ, which was like a startup comic company. I think they were doing like audio comic books or something like that. And it's funny because we sent them over Happiness Equation, which was the first manga that me and the writer worked on together, and it actually got like a voiceover, and I thought that was pretty cool as well. So all this to say, obviously I didn't improve my skills overnight. I got to where I am from like consistent work and just pouring myself into something that I'm passionate about. Like I love to draw, I love illustrating stories. Obviously during this time too, I was working on other webtoons, and you can see them on my webtoon profile. They're mostly like shorts or just like shorter ideas that I wanted to push out through webtoons. Even now though, I'm still not completely satisfied with my art. I know its shortcomings, I know where I struggle, I know there are things I still want to improve. But I think that I'm finally learning to be okay with that, because I can recognize these shortcomings without letting them stop me from creating. I can look at my art and say, yeah, this could be better, and I just keep drawing. I'll work on it, but I won't beat myself up for it. There are thousands of artists who could have done the projects that I was given. Probably a lot of them could have done better than I did at making them, but they would not have made them the way I made them. And they would not have chosen the stories that I chose to write or how I chose to write them. And I think that distinction matters more than we realize. I believe those projects were given to me because in some small but meaningful way, only I could make them what they became. Not because I'm the most talented person in the room, but because I brought my own experiences, instincts, imperfections, obsessions, perspective, and way of seeing the world to them. This is the part no one else can replicate. And that's why I think it's important to realize that no other artist and no AI can ever truly recreate what you have to offer creatively. It can imitate your style, it can learn your patterns, it can reproduce the surface of what you make, but it can't be you. There will always be someone more skilled than you, someone faster, someone more experienced, someone who can technically do what you do. But there has never been and will never be another you. I believe God has each given us our own path, our own disposition, our own way of seeing and creating, and that gift isn't reserved for people who call themselves artists. Maybe you paint, maybe you design, maybe you write, maybe you make people laugh, cook meals, lead people, or simply see beauty where others don't. Whatever that is, there is something you can bring into the world that no one else can bring in exactly the same way. So don't spend your life trying to prove that you're the best. Don't let comparison convince you that your contribution is meaningless because someone else could have done it. I think as artists, we should focus on being our most authentic selves and being genuine in our art. I think everyone's time will come when they are called to create something, and this is a given, but whether you're up to the task or not is on you. The point was never that no one else could do it. The point is that no one else could have done it as you. And maybe that's the whole reason you were given the opportunity in the first place. Because the goal isn't to make the perfect drawing. The goal is to keep becoming a better artist. And sometimes that means making something that sucks, or making something that's bad, or like it's a little bit off. Sometimes it means finishing a comic that doesn't look exactly how you imagined it. Sometimes it means looking at your work and knowing you could have done better, but choosing to finish it anyway. Because you can't improve a drawing you've never finished, and you definitely can't become a better artist if you're too scared to make something imperfect. So I think that's something I really want to take into this new comic. I don't want to spend the entire process worrying about whether every panel is good enough. I just want to make it. I want to learn from it. Obviously try my best, and hopefully by the time I get to the end, I'll be able to look back and see how much I've grown, just like with my past comics that I've done, and just reflect on how far I've come. Because at the end of the day, I think that's what being an artist is. You're never really finished. There's always something else to learn, something else to improve, and something else you're going to look back on and think, why did I draw it like that? But that's kind of the point. So if you're struggling with perfectionism, I think this is your reminder that you're allowed to be bad. You're allowed to make something that isn't perfect, and you're allowed to make mistakes. Just make something. Because eventually you're going to look back at what you made today and realize that it was just another step toward becoming the artist you want to be.